different things.
On, by the way.
Okay, so let's get started. It's past the hour. So the training this morning is all based on the USPA and IFP rulebook for 2021, which is out there and alive, and of course the PCO referee handbook. Those are the two main things. The PCO referee handbook, let me just say, that is the Bible. When you're wanting to referee, everything that is in that handbook is important and you must follow to the letter. We'll get to different places in there, but just so you understand, when it says that you call a timeout and you walk to the middle, you do your different things, and then you walk to the middle of the court, you don't go halfway to the middle of the court. You don't just take 2 steps towards the middle of the court. You go to the middle of the court. Then we'll get into that. So I'm just making the point that handbook is the Bible. You need to follow it explicitly. We're dealing with 5 sections, not this morning, but within this session. That's what this training is all about. It's usually about a 4-hour session, is what I've found. It's hard to cut back from that. Then what we've done is we've added the 2021 rule changes, or the current year's rule changes. And depending on those rule changes, that adds another section and another amount of time. Working with line judges has been expanded a little bit. And so that's, again, a bit of an addition. So we're going to be hard pressed to get this all in, is what I'm saying, within the 4 hours. Section 1 is foundation and best practices, which really come down to your conduct as a referee and the best practices when it comes to scorekeeping. And scorekeeping is the cornerstone of refereeing. What I liken it to is if you were, well, I won't go there, just say that it is so important, you have to get that down, and it has to be second nature to you. Code of conduct. When you're certified, obviously, and you're wearing the shirt with the PCO logo on it or the USAPA logo, you're representing that whole organization. And it's important at all times to be that professional out there on that court. So there's certain things that we don't want you to do. There's certain things that you must do. So be professional and be pleasant at all times to all people. Be respectful to the others that are on the court. And certainly you need to avoid over-friendliness. If you know people, you can't be all over them and talking to them, where the poor people on the other side of the net, they don't know you and they're going, boy, we've lost this one. The referee's in their pocket over there. So again, how that appears is very important. Avoid emotional reactions. If you get an emotional player over there that gets upset at you, you just want to avoid that. You've got to take it calm. You've got to be able to mediate it in a very logical and nice, calm manner. It used to say, avoid commenting on play that is happening. I know I've been center court down at the Nationals, and there's been some terrific things where you want to say, geez, that was really a good rally. You can't say anything out there. You never comment on the play that's happening before you. Doesn't matter how spectacular, how bad, whatever. You are closed lips when it comes to that. Again, you can't be seen to be recognizing any one team over another team. It could look to be not impartial. So you have to be impartial at all times, and you have to appear to be impartial at all times. So it says now, do not, okay? It's not avoid, it is do not. That is a law. Do not comment on play. Avoid anger and confrontation as much as you can. You have to deal with it. You have to lower the temperature on that court. You have to bring it down and talk to them logically. And there's a way of doing that at center court. Regardless of what your beliefs are and what you like about the rules or the best practices, they are there and they are to be followed. And your job is to train that and to show that on the court at all times. Avoid being dictatorial. They don't want a dictator out there just because you're the referee and wearing the shirt and you got the rule book and I'm going to issue technical warnings, we're going to issue technical fouls, and it's going to be my way or the highway. That's not really what it's all about, right? You've got to show some discretion out there at all times, and you only want to go to those steps when the situation allows you no other alternative. Devote full attention to the match before you. That's such an easy one to say, but let me tell you right now that probably is the most difficult thing for you to do when you're starting out, is to make sure you have your blinders on and you are devoting full attention. Your mind will take you to something else, maybe something that happened in the last play. That's the last play. You now have to leave that aside, and you now have to focus with blinders on at what is happening before you at that moment, and you have to be able to deal with it. And if your mind wanders, you're going to be missing out what's happening on that court, whether it's a foot fault in the non-volley zone or whatever else is happening. So again, you can't let your mind wander. It's got to be absolutely laser focused. Stand and be attentive. So what we're saying there is there's no seating for the referee, no seats on the court. You're standing for the full match. And believe me, that's not an easy task if you're putting in, well, even a 2-hour shift, 4-hour shift, or working all day. You've got to be in shape to be a referee. A lot of people don't realize that. You're using a different muscle group to be standing there. Your back, your legs are taking quite a beating. Avoid leaning on walls and fences. Again, I don't like the use of the word avoid. Do not lean on walls or fences, even if your back is killing you. You mustn't do that. That's not professional to be leaning and hanging around. So you don't do that. Don't carry any device that could interfere with play. Well, that means turn off your cell phone and leave it somewhere else. Now, of course, we have iWatches that are vibrating on your wrist and doing other things. And so you need to avoid that. There's nothing worse than watching, about a 50 hit rally, and all of a sudden your wrist starts to vibrate on you, and you look down at it and you miss that half-inch foot fault that is happening on the no volley zone. Excuse yourself from refereeing family, close friends, and doubles partners. That's a very important one. Again, that transparency of being fair and equitable at all times. As a matter of fact, USAPA has had a couple of circumstances where people have put themselves into a conflict, if you will, over that, and they have actually lost their certification. So that's how seriously this is taken. It's even to the point where if I'm a referee and Paddle Tech or one of the paddle companies has got me as a sponsored player, and I'm a referee, I am not allowed to go referee any other matches with sponsored players from that company. So what we're really saying is if you're a referee and a player, you're putting yourself at real jeopardy in trying to referee the matches. So you're going to probably be one or the other. Not required, you just can't referee anybody that would be seen as a conflict. I think a couple of, whoops, where'd I go? What happened? You guys probably didn't see anything happen, did you? Walter?
What are you trying to do?
Well, I lost my my PowerPoint.
We're back.
Okay, good. Be what you would like your referee to be. I think that says a lot. The referee is a facilitator. I really like that one. That really puts it into a nice frame of context, that you're out there to help facilitate a match between either two players, singles, or the 4 players in a doubles match. You're there to facilitate and help them get to the end of the match in a nice, equitable way, and dealing with any issues, dealing with the rules and meeting problems and keeping track of the score. The other is the match is about the players in the game. What it doesn't say there, it's not about the referee. It's not about you as the referee, about how good you are or what you're doing. You need to be seamless out there. You need to be not recognized and then you've done an excellent job. You've allowed the players to get on with the game before them, and you've just, again, facilitate that means in that play. So that's a pretty important slide. Now we've lost that one. Primary responsibilities as a referee. This is important, obviously. Keep and announce the correct score. Obviously, we all do it as players. We announce the score, and before every rally. But as a referee, you're doing this for every hit that is happening out there. And the whole idea is for you to get that done without making a mistake. So 4-3-2, and you go up and you look at your score sheet and you go 5-3-2, no, referee error. You've made a mistake. You don't want to make those mistakes. The whole goal here is to referee a perfect game without making a bad call and having to make a change. That's a challenge for you because it's really difficult to do, very difficult to do. And again, depending whether you're doing a 2-hour stint as a referee or you're doing a 6 or an 8-hour stint. Track the correct server and recognize server and receiver positioning faults. So again, absolutely key. One of your main responsibilities. Call the correct score, check the receiver, check the server, make sure that those identification bands are in the right place depending on the score. Call service and non-volley zone faults. Again, another primary responsibility. That no volley zone, they've actually changed it. If you notice there, it's no longer non-volley zone. They've changed it to the no volley zone. Means the same thing, just different, drop one consonant. So again, important to be focusing your full attention on the no volley zone during the rally. And we're going to teach you a bit of a hint on that and how to do that more efficiently than probably you've been doing. Maintain control and keep the match moving efficiently. Another very important one I find is that serving team must be allowed to dictate the pace of the match. In other words, the receivers, you don't want them kicking around, moving slowly into position and slowing down that ability of that server to keep that match moving. So you've got to be cognizant of that, and you've got to be fair for both teams when they're serving to make sure that they can maintain that control. So if somebody is moving a little slowly into that receiving spot, you maybe need to just say to them, you need to move a little bit more quickly into the position. And if it continues to get worse, then you're going to have to issue your first line of disciplinary offenses, which would be a technical warning, of course, and we'll get into that. Another primary responsibilities continued here is recognize violations and enforce rules and resolve disputes. Luckily, that doesn't happen all the time. It happens a fair amount, but it's something you've got to be on top on, and that's why we're expecting you to get 90% minimum on tests to be a level 2 or a level 3 referee. You need to know your rules inside and out. And of course, every year this is getting more difficult with the changes that come in. It was great when we first started, the rule book was thinner and you had nothing else in your mind. So you read the rule book and you caught it. Now, every year there's subsequent changes and you're going, oh my God, it used to be this, it's now that, and now it's changed over here. So it's getting more difficult and increasingly more difficult every year to keep up on it, especially when there's 96 or 120 rule changes. Rule on line calls only when requested by a player. All right, so this is the first point that I like a little interaction. So who's going to be the first to open their mic? I'll let you do this and tell me an exception to that rule. Rule on line calls only when requested by a player. There is a time as a referee that you don't have to wait to be requested to make a line call by a player. When is it? Walter, have you got that dozen cookies ready to send out to the winner here?
When the serve is short.
Say again?
When the serve is short,
Nope.
no cookies for me then.
Oh, I ate them already anyway, so it's okay.
When the line falls on the serve,
Just to hang on, let me just go back to that last gentleman that said that question. That's not a bad answer considering the question here. We're talking about line calls for out of bounds. You're absolutely right, because the non-volley zone is your area of responsibility. So you're not incorrect in that one, but we're talking about out calls as for out of bounds during a rally.
The line.
When you have a lines person that says it was a
Who said that?
Daniel Smith.
Very good, Daniel Smith. No, not quite correct.
When there was an
When you have a
impeachment,
line person who puts their hand over their eyes that they did not see the shot.
Identify yourself, sir.
Bud Hebner.
Yeah, Bud, are you CR?
No, level two.
That was Bruce. That was Bruce I'm thinking of. Yes, you're correct. That's it exactly. So when the line judge does this and signifies that they have been unsighted and cannot make a line call, the referee now does not need to be asked to make that line call. They can immediately chirp in and call that ball in or out accordingly. Okay, so that's good. That just keeps you on your toes a little bit. There will be questions. All right, you may issue verbal warnings for profanity. This is a new one that's come in. That's why it's in red. Another little tool. And what the rule actually says is that the referee may issue one time in a match to all players for profanity when it is escalating to a point when that referee feels that that warning is required. They can simply say, call all the people together and say, I'm giving you all a verbal warning. No more profanity will be tolerated. And then the next time it'll happen, it's obviously then it escalates in discipline to the first technical warning to that team. Okay, so it's another tool. What I still don't like about it, I guess, is we had a little bit of a conversation on this, is that verbal warnings were available to be called for other purposes. I did, for example, the slow player that I was talking about that is slowing the play down. You would simply say to them, pick up your pace, or I'm going to have to, issue a technical warning. They're now saying that it's only profanity. And of course, the conflict there is, if you're telling that person that you're going to issue a technical warning, does that become coaching? And so we're watching very closely now that referees are not allowed to be coaching again and favoring a team. So if you're telling them they're going to get one, that disfavors the other team, puts them at a little bit of a loss, because if that other team had got a technical warning, that would be in their favor. So there's that gray area in there. After the verbal warning, of course, as in your tool bag, you have technical warnings, and technical fouls escalate up the ladder.
Alan,
Yes.
you said ago in Moncton, 2 slides back, you mentioned that now it's called a no volley zone.
Yes.
Well, yet in the 2021 rule book, it's still called the non-volley zone.
All I can say is it's been a bit of a miss. They'll want to pick that up because they identified that they want to call it the no volley zone now, not the non-volley zone. Not a big deal.
In their handbook, they have it as no volley.
Yeah.
So it's coming.
Yeah, everybody's been scrambling pretty good with the 120 rule changes and little word changes, definition changes, and trying to pick it up in all the material.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Oops, got to go back there. Missed that one. Pre-tournament procedures. Now, again, this is for referees that are doing a lot of tournaments pretty close to each other. And so you want to do a little bit of pre-tournament warm-up. So what we recommend is that you review the current rules. You might want to even read the rule book. Every time you read that rule book, little words take on new meaning based on your experiences in the past matches that you've been doing and what has transpired. And it's really interesting. I find it really interesting. Again, those little words that make all the difference. That's why when something happens on that court, your best learning is to go back into the rule book and read that section in detail and see how that applies. And it puts it into context. And that's why it's so good and so important to do the quizzes that are online. A lot of thought have gone into those questions for the most part. Some of them aren't as good as others, but a lot of them are very good. They're situational, and it gets you thinking, and that really solidifies learning of the rules and putting it in your brain. The referee handbook, again, explains how you're to do things as the referee. And again, I can't explain or express the importance of that handbook when you're wanting to go for level 1 and level 2. Absolutely key. Recommend, again, we're talking about the quizzes and online. So the officials and referee test is available. There's a best practices test, and there's a line judge test. There's another one, Walter. I guess maybe it's on the next page here, is it? No.
What's that, Al?
What was the other test that we did? Tournament test. There was one that did a whole series of things. Tournament preparation test.
We're going to put a tournament prep test, which is a combination of questions from various different sources.
Yeah. So those are all really, really good. And it's, play a little game, see how good you can do and how you can improve through them. And it's a bank of quizzes. So if there's 100 questions out there, you're only getting how many, Walter? 50 on the ref test, let's say, it doesn't matter. So you're getting 50. It just goes through and randomly picks and selects the ones that you're getting. So it's different each and every time that you take it. So again, it's really worthwhile to do that numerous times. Prepare mentally and physically. If you're going to a tournament to referee, again, depending on your stints that you're doing, 2, 4, 6 hours, you have to prepare both physically and mentally for that. You need to stretch, you need to work out, you need to hydrate a couple of days before if you're doing it down in Arizona, let me tell you, maybe not in New Brunswick, maybe not in Newfoundland, but certainly in Arizona, Florida, you need to hydrate before you go out there. Pick up the tools in advance. So you get to the tournament early. You report to the tournament operations desk. You talk to the head referee. You pick up your tools, your pencils, your stopwatch. You got your pouch with you. Make sure your pegs are there. Get a couple of balls. Make sure that they're round. And then what you do is you have to now learn the layout of the courts at that facility. When you go to nationals and there's 45 courts, obviously they're not very close together. And you need to learn where they are and the shortest route to get from A to B, because you want to be there before the players get there. And then as soon as the match is over, you want to be back at the operations desk to turn in that score sheet so that they can get on and calling that court for usage. That's very important. So don't be hanging around your court down there talking to the player and explaining something, or a rule or something. You need to be heading back, no exception. Pick up tools in advance. We talked about that. No venue court layout. Yes, good. Pick up score sheets and activate your timer. So depending on your tournament director, normally speaking, it's probably 5 minutes after a match is called over the broadcast system. They give you about 5 minutes to get to the court, to do your warm up, and to start your match. Now, larger facilities, maybe 8 minutes. I don't think I've ever seen 10. And that's why you have to hustle, because by the time you get there, by the time you give us quick briefing, introductions all around, you annotate your score sheet that you have to, which we'll get into. Time goes by very quickly, and then the players want some time to still warm up. They want the continuing amount of time to be able to warm up still, because at a large tournament, they're not getting a lot of court time before their matches. Review the score sheet that's in front of you. check for the player's name. Is there any conflict of interest? Is it one of your past doubles partners? Is it a friend? Is it your wife? Is it your husband? Because you're not going out there if it is. Right? You have to turn that one back in and say, I'll take the next match, please. Look at the court number, top right-hand corner of the score sheet will give you the court number that you're heading to. Do not mix the court number up with the match number. I've done that. Match number 14. And you head down to court 14. And that's not where you should be. You're on court 42. So that happens. Look at the match format. Is it 1 to 15? Is it a best of 3 to 11 by 2? Are we playing 1 to 21? Those are all different options. You need to know that. You need to explain that to the players so they understand that before they begin. End change notation. We have a new score sheet where they're just introducing this year. Some little changes to it. Better format for all the different things now a referee has to do. So they're somewhat identified. So that's going to make it a bit easier. End change notation is a triangle at the bottom of the third game on both sides of the score sheet that identify whether you're switching ends at 6 points, 8 points, or 11 points. Make sure there is a 1 or a 2 with just a pencil mark on the back of the score sheet, because that's what you're going to turn over when you get to the court to identify their choice of end, serve, receive, or defer. You're going to ask one of the players to choose a 1 or a 2. That's the only way, by the way, that you should be deciding the end, the side, the end or serve. And proceed without delay. Enter the court and exit the court with the players. I put in there when required. There's a lot of courts where it's not necessary that you have to enter together. But there are courts where you have to go through another court to get to a court. There are courts where you have to go past players who are playing to get to another court. In that instance, you get there first and you hold your group until all players are all ready to proceed directly to their court. And then you interfere with that game once and once only as you go through. And you ask permission as the referee. You wait for that rally to stop and complete. Then you announce yourself to the referee and say, referee, coming through, please. And you ask permission and you go through when they grant you the time. That's just courtesy. You need to be there at the court to check out for any safety hazards, any obstacles that are unique to that particular court, whatever they might be. And you want to include that in your pre-court briefing with the players, just to acknowledge whatever that situation might be. You want to check portable nets every time they change very rapidly, very quickly, very easily. So you need to be able to check and make sure we're 36 inches at the sides and 34 in the middle. You don't necessarily have a tape with you, but you need to be able to identify at least where it should be closely aligned. I carry a tape. Make sure you have the 2 starting server armbands. That's usually the identification for the first server at most matches, or at most tournaments, I should say. And let me just make a point here that those armbands or identification markers unique to that tournament must be worn by the players at that tournament. So again, that tournament's identification must be visible to all players, or to the players and the referee during the match at all times. They can put it on their shoe, they can put it on their wrist, they can put it on their ankle, but it must be visible at all times. 2 official balls for the match, and again, check for roundness. Make sure you're bringing good balls down there. Check for cracks in them at all times and get rid of them if they have cracks in them. A lot of players don't like brand new balls. So if you have brand new balls, they scuff them up during practice usually, and that's good to carry that. You can carry 1 new ball with you and have a selection. Consider the sun choose your position on the court. Now, this is important. All right. Seems probably you're just thinking, well, it doesn't really matter where I stand. It does matter. And there's a few things to consider. The sun is probably one of the main ones. Where's the sun? Is it in your eyes, in the player's eyes? Is it casting a shadow? Would you be casting a shadow and therefore interfering with play? If your shadow is in the middle of the court and you're moving, just as somebody's going to hit it, that can interfere with the play. So you don't want to be there. Consider where the spectators are. You want to be probably being heard. So you want your voice to be broadcasting towards the majority of the spectators. That's a secondary concern. But the line judges is a very important one. How you align the line judges, where they can stand, then might dictate where you have to stand. Because, well, we'll get that into the line judge. Let's just leave it there right now, and we'll say that's important. We'll explain why when we deal with the line judges. Pre-match briefing. Require the players' undivided attention. That's a good one, because you get out there and you call the players together, and there's always, it seems like there's always one person who doesn't want to be there and doesn't really care. He's heard it before, she's heard it before. So they're taking off their sweats, they're having a drink or doing whatever. You're going to talk, they're going to listen. It's important for you to know that they have heard and understood what you have said. So you get their undivided attention and you wait for them to come over and ask them politely to come over and listen. You do the introductions, you introduce yourself, you get all their names, you do a paddle check. And what you're looking for on a paddle check is any roughness that is on that paddle that shouldn't be there. You're looking to make sure that it's a US APA approved paddle and has that designation, and it does not belong in the unapproved paddle list. That, however, is no longer your responsibility. It's something you can check, and it's something you can get them to change. But again, if you miss it, they're not absolved of any wrongdoing. In other words, if you miss it and they play with it and another referee looks over to your court and says, hey, that person that's playing over there has got an illegal paddle, that person now forfeits that match. So you can help the players by knowing which paddles are not approved. And it's on the USAPA website. I don't think it's on the PCO website yet, but it's on the USAPA website. And again, you're not going to know all the paddles that are approved. You need to just pay attention to the ones that are not approved. There's far fewer of those. And what's coming out, I think it's 2022 or 2023, there has to be a USAPA approved label on there. State the match format. Again, 1 to 15, where switch ends at 8. Best out of 3 to by 11 by 2 matches. They should know that before they play. Review the line calling responsibilities. This is an important one. Tell them that they are responsible for all lines, exterior lines, and they know to make their calls loudly and clearly and timely. You will be calling all the non-volley zone infractions. So that's a good one to get clear. If you're using line judges, you of course let them know that the line judges now are absolving them of making any line calls, and that's over to the line judges. There is one exception to that. Now I'll ask you for that one. Where's the exception to the line calling responsibilities for players when using line judges? When therefore does a player still have to call the line?
The center line.
Very good. You guys weren't as sleepy as I thought. So yeah, and then you use your 1 or a 2, not Ford or Chevy, not Mountain and Valley, which I've seen all of those ones. It's a 1 or a 2 written on the back of the score sheet. And by the way, for transparency, when all you do is you decide what player you're going to look at and say 1 or a 2, please. And you just point to them and they'll say 2. And then what you do is you take your score sheet. Where's my score sheet? I have one here. I think you can see it. So what you do is you turn over the page, if I can get it, and you show them where the 1 or a 2 is right on here, and you show it to all 4 people, making sure they all 4 have seen it and understand no wrongdoing in that one. This is hugely important. If you don't do this pre-match stuff correctly, it can affect your ability to referee the rest of the game and your outcome of the game. You must identify each team's starting server. Okay, so that means getting their name, circling their name on the score sheet for each team. So the person wearing the band gets circled. Identify underneath that, around it somewhere, whether some unique thing that you can recognize them with, whether they're wearing a red top, a blue hat, they got blonde hair, they got ponytail, whatever. Make that little annotation there. It's also help you identify that starting server so that you don't have to look at the band. You know the person wearing the red shirt is the server. The guy wearing the blue shirt is the receiver for that team. And over on the other side, we have something else. So now you have a shortcut to it. Okay, that's important because you need to know what players are playing together. There's nothing more confusing when you call those 4 players to the center net and you don't know who's on who. You don't know who's partnering with who at that point. So you really need to get that clearly in your mind and make sure that you have the right team. So then at that point, you continue with the remaining amount of time that's left. You tell them they have 2.5 minutes to continue warming up. And then you give them a 1 minute till game notice. You just say 1 minute remaining. And most tournament players at that point will turn and go into a serving routine for 1 minute, the last minute, and they'll serve the ball back and forth to each other. And before that happens, you just call time, and then they get into position and get ready to play. Now, a lot of times what happens is they end up taking off their sweats and doing different things, which now we have gone over that 5 minutes. So you need to just be cognizant of that. They really need to be starting play at the end of 5 minutes. And it's not as hard and fast as some other timing points, but that's one that you, again, the tournament directors are very, very concerned about the amount of time it's going to take to get through all their matches that day. So you want to be helping by getting that play started as quickly as you can, not wasting any time while on the courts down there. Preparing the score sheet, you mark the serving team for each game. We talked about that. You circle the starting server, record identification. Yep, we talked about that. And confirm the end change annotations. Again, on the new score sheet, those triangles are in there for best of 3 to 11x2 or 1 to 15. It's already put on there for you. So here we are. Here's a sample of the new score sheet. You'll see some differences on there. We'll talk about them as we get to them. But right now, we have the referee's numbered pin, the closed peg here, with the number 2 on it, because, of course, we start the match at 0-0-2. We do not start the match and say 0-0 start. That used to be an acceptable way to call the first point in the match. It is no longer. It is always numbers, and the start of the match is 0-0-2. And Mary Smith for this team is the starting server. So you've circled her name. Jim Smith, you don't much care about, because while all this match, you're going to be paying attention to where Mary is, whether she's in the even court, the odd court, or the left court or the right court, right? That's all we're concerned about. When she's in the right-hand court, it's the even court. She's got the band on, the score should be even. That's one of the concepts that we can't get past until everybody's got that firmly and squarely in their minds. Serving band, even court, right-hand court. Okay. This is just showing a 1-game-to-15 match for the starting server. So we have the triangle down there. Can you see my mouse, Walter?
Yes,
Okay, good.
yes, we
So
can.
there's the triangle for the 8, which would be change ends at 8 points. You'll notice I'm saying changing ends as opposed to changing sides. That's one of the important things for you to understand. We talk about sides of court when we're talking odd and even, left and right. We talk ends as far as north and south, east and west, if you like. So there where you go through the other side of the net. That's an important thing for you to understand. Changing ends, changing sides. Point the clipboard clip towards the serving team. Again, this is a key foundation of scorekeeping. You can always tell a ref that's had training as opposed to one that's maybe starting out or had no training, because the clipboard clip is not necessarily facing the team that is serving. And so when you're standing there, the clip that's holding your paper onto the clipboard, the score sheet onto the clipboard, has that clip, that's facing in the direction of the team that is serving. Okay? Another key foundation. We're going to show you a picture of that just to make sure. The server clip over the circled starting server's name that you saw previously with the number 2 on it at the start of the match. Established position 3 to 4 feet directly behind the net post. We used to teach that you would stand slightly to the left or the right of the net post for the serving team to help you identify the serving team. Now we don't want you moving at all, and we want you at least 3 to 4 feet behind that net post. Depending on the court layout, you might be 5 feet, and depending on the players that you're playing, you're refereeing. If the players are young and agile and are likely to do ATPs and Ernies, you want to be well back from that net post, 5 to 6 feet. You don't want to be too far back because you have to consider you need to be able to see both sides of the non-volley zone equally well on all corners of that non-volley zone. So you need to be looking at that. Confirm the teams by name at the beginning of the match only. So this is the only time that you're going to address the players by name, and otherwise it could be looked on as coaching. So what you're going to say, on my left, I'm pointing in that direction, right? There I am. I have Mary and John Smith. Is that correct? On my right, I've got Charlie and Louise Brown. Is that correct? And you get an affirmation on that. We're not saying who the starting server is. We're not saying who the receiver is. So you just make sure that your score sheet is properly aligned. I know of a ref that went through, did that, got affirmation of both players, all 4 players. They finished the match, 3-game match, got them to sign, and the person looks down and says, oh, that's not us. We're over there. We're upside down. We won. And they had the names completely reversed the whole match. And none of the players acknowledged that they were wrong when their name was called. So the referee did their thing. They didn't. So that could have been a huge problem if that score sheet, that person didn't catch it and just merely signed it like a lot of people do at the end of a match. That would have gone into the officiating desk. That would have gone up. The wrong team would have been promoted. The other team would have probably gone home. And guess who would have been in the medal round when they shouldn't have been? So that's what you have to guard against. Little things like that are subtleties. And again, if you don't get this right and you're 2 points in and you think, oh, I don't even have the names right, I got my sheet the wrong way around, you're now not paying attention to the things you should be paying attention to. And that's a horrible start to the match. So again, I'm telling you this from experience. This is an important part of the match, that pre-match briefing. It's so important to identify the players. Make sure you got those identifiers down and you know who is who. Make sure that the server bands, players' identification are clearly observable again by the players and yourself, and make sure they remain that way for the entire match. I mean, a lot of people go into matches and they have a long sleeve shirt on and it starts creeping down and all of a sudden you can't see it. Well, you know that that person with the red shirt on, not the blue one, is the server, but the other team may not. So you have to be on them to make sure that it's observable and don't have to change it all the time. So they may have to take the shirt off. They have to maybe change its location, whatever. If they have to do that, you can call a referee timeout to allow that to happen. At time -0, you simply at that point say game number 1, time in, and it's 0-0-2. And now the server has 10 seconds to get the ball in play. You'll notice that we didn't check the receiver. We didn't check the server. Well, you do check it, but you don't have to. When the time is up, especially at the end of a timeout, you simply call time in, call the score, and play begins. So here's what we were talking about, changing sides and changing ends. So if somebody's changing sides, they're going from the even court to the odd court. If we're changing ends, we're going from the north to the south side of the court on the opposite side of the net. So that's so important. And again, this little diagram shows you the person here on the right-hand side of this court, the even court, with the armband on. And over here, this person is the receiver, or the server in this case, the server. They've got the ball, they've got the armband on. So whether this is the first points of the game or whether it's the later on in a match, all we can determine from this is that the score is even, right? Because it's band to band, right-hand court to right-hand court, the score is even and we're good to go. If the score is 4-3-2, what's going to happen is this person is going to serve, this person is going to return the ball, and as soon as they return the ball, you go fault, in wrong server or incorrect server or receiver, and call a fault on them. Let them know. Right, so here we have the clipboard clip towards the serving team. So this is the clip that we're talking about, so there's no confusion. That should be in front of you, like this. Where's my, like this, right? And this clip right here needs to be pointing in the direction of the team that is serving. So if it's right in front of you and it's to your left, then the team that's to the left of the net should be the team that is serving. Their name is upright on the score sheet. The other team is upside down. And that's important because we're going to make some annotations on the score sheet to the receiving team when it's upside down, that you make those annotations when it's upside down. So it's important that you understand that and know that. Any questions regarding that? Didn't
Don't
hear
see any
anybody.
coming.
Good. Well, are there any questions at all yet so far on chat?
Yeah, I've answered about 20.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and some I said it's coming, it's coming.
Okay, good, good. Prior to every serve, then again, important. This is what your routine has to be. Each and every time you go from a dead ball situation to calling the score. This is your routine. First, you look at the receiver and their partner. Are they ready or should they be ready? So let's just talk about the should be ready. It's your determination, referee discretion, how much time you think should be allowed for people to be able to move from A to B in a prompt, a not unreasonable amount of time. And if they've had that time and are wasting it going extra slowly, kicking their, I don't know, doing whatever, then you just simply call the score. And then they must be in position. If, however, the receiver's partner has left the court and gone to get a ball and throws it back over the fence to the serving team, we're not going to call that score until that receiver's partner is well in position and has arrived back where they should be. That just makes courtesy and makes abundant sense to me. All right. So again, we don't want them dragging their behind, but they should be moving promptly to it. Your discretion again, how much time you give, but you need to understand that when you call that score, that team should be ready, and the serving team has the right to serve the ball after that complete score is called now. You've finished after you've checked the receivers. You then have to turn your head to the other side of the net, other end of the court, if you like, other end of the court. And you look at the serving team and their partner. Are they ready? Should they be ready? If everything, all lights are green, everybody's ready, based on the score and the serving bands mentally confirm, are the server and the receiver in the correct position? So again, if the score is even, and say we're at the start of the match, because that's when we know where everybody's in their neutral positions at 0-0-2, we know we have service band to service band. That's fine. If that team gets a point on the serve, it is now 1-0-2. So now what we have is the server is in the left-hand court and the receiver is on the left-hand court of the other team. The person with the server band, however, is still in the right-hand court. So the server by default is the person without the band, and they are in the left-hand court. If that's the situation, green light, good to go. If it's not the situation, you as a referee have to be very aware that you're not allowed to coach. Your coaching can be very subtle, or could be looked upon as being subtle. If you start looking down at your score sheet, second guessing yourself, they understand that there's maybe something wrong, because the way the referee's acting, they look at each other and go, oh, the score's 1 or 0 or whatever. And then they change sides based on the score because you've given it away. So you can't give it away. You have to just call the score, keep to your normal situation, your normal cadence, and call it. And as soon as the person who is not in the proper position or is the improper person returns the ball and makes contact with that ball, that's the time you call fault and explain what the situation is. Now, there's been some changes. This is a pretty major change for this year based on previous year's rules. Any player now may ask, what is the score? Am I the correct server? Am I the correct receiver? Am I in the correct position? All of that now is green light and fair game to be asked by the referee. And you can tell them. If they continually ask it, however, you can tell them that it's up to them to have to understand, I'm not going to tell you each and every time and delay the game. You need to know where you are. You need to know the score. And you can call them for unsportsmanlike contact, unsportsmanlike play if that continues. You're not usually going to run into that, but that's something that could be used as a ploy. Call time in to stop play. Why that's in red was we just had some recent dialogue with USAPA on that. They said not to use time because time might be misconstrued as calling a timeout. And I went back at them pretty hard and going, look, all other sports, everybody I know, and I've been doing it since I go time, throw my hands up in the air, and I'll tell you that stops play right away. And anything that happens after that point in time, it's a dead ball situation. So again, you take command out there. And you've got to be able to, when you yell time, it's like yelling out as a linesperson. You want to be heard on probably 3 courts over, right? So you get up there and you give a nice big hands up, time, and stop play. No question about it, whether it was a hindrance or whatever it might be. So now the subtle difference in this one is that you have to do this. You could be going 4-3, not got the 1 or a 2 out yet, and somebody says, am I the correct server? You must throw your hands in the air, call time, step onto the court, answer the question, step back, and I will recall the score. And at that point, as soon as you recall the score, at any time, you are restarting the 10-second clock that server has to start this, to get the serve and that ball into play. Right? So that's an important thing to remember. That's why we used to always say to referees, do not, when asked, after you've called the score, the people will look at you and say, ref, did you call the score? And I've seen referees recall the score. Well, they restart that 10-second clock. That's not what you do. You say, yes, I have. And I just give a little wave of the hand. I go like this to them to serve the ball. Announce the score clearly, loudly, and with a consistent cadence. The key there really is the cadence needs to be consistent, and especially so this year with the rule changes and now being able to start your service motion prior to the score being completely called, right? So that's quite a change for this year.
Mr.
People
Thomson.
can now start their service motion before the complete score is called. They cannot, however, make contact with a paddle to ball before the complete score is called. So you as a referee now, we've already gone through the routine. Let's just say it one more time. Before I call the score, check the receiver, check the receiver's partner, look at the other end of the court, check the server's partner, check the server, ball in hand, good. We checked that they're proper identification for the score. We've checked that. Good, we're gonna call the score. 4-3, and then somebody calls time, or am I the correct server? Then you throw your hands in the air and stop play. All right, everyone, time in. We'll go back to where we were. Top of page 28 here. So prior to every serve, announce the score clearly, loudly, and with a consistent cadence. And again, the cadence is key because if you change it from 4-3-2 to 4-3-2, that person now might have struck the ball and you've caused them to make an error. That really should be called a referee error because the referee caused it. So not changing your cadence or having one cadence that you can use all the time is so very important. So that's something you have to work on your delivery. 4-3-2, 2-5-1, whatever it might be, you give it loudly, clearly, and you know, in that same manner, same pace. Any player may signal not ready prior to the start of the score being called, right? So all 4 players have the ability to identify not ready. How do you identify not ready? Well, there's a number of ways, right? Raising the non-paddle hand is one, above the head. Raising your paddle above your head. Turning your back to the net is another, indicating you're not ready. And as a referee, you need to recognize those if the situation warrants it, right? So if you haven't started calling the score, then you can recognize it. If you've started calling the score, you don't recognize it. Now, you know, if you notice that there's a wasp that is buzzing the receiver's head just as you're calling the score, call time, allow them to get into position. There, you know, we don't want anybody to get hurt. So you've got to be really on the ball and really watching for that sort of thing. After the score is called, you must ignore not ready signals. So again, after the score is called, there's no way of stopping that. Now, we just had somebody ask the question about something that happens after the score is called. So you called it and somebody says, am I in the correct position, ref? Might be the person who's the receiver who's standing right beside you, right up at the net. And you just simply ignore that. You've called the score, ball's in play. That used to warrant a fault, no longer warrants a fault. You just allow it to be said, you can't respond to it, and you allow play to continue. If they turn around and say, ref, was that the correct score? They're now challenging the score. That is different. So you must stop play. And if they are correct and you as the referee have made an error, and that is called before the third shot is made, then there is no penalty towards the person who asked it because it was a referee error. So you simply say referee error, I will recall the score. If, however, you were correct, no, that was the correct score, then the person who stopped play is at fault, and that warrants a point to the other team if they were serving. If the serving team did it to themselves, then it's a loss of server. So it would be second server or side out. Right, any questions on that? That cover the question we had, Walter?
I'm too busy looking at new questions. Don't ask me.
Okay, good. We'll go on until you come in. So as the referee, you're always busy out there, but you're never more busy than when you're starting a rally and all the things that you have to do. So again, we started this by checking the receiver, the partner, the server, watching for all this. Now what we have to watch for after the ball is served, we watch to make sure that the serve was legal to begin with. What type of serves they're using now has to be observed, and then we'll talk about that in more detail. But you're certainly going to be watching for foot faults on the baseline. You're watching to make sure that they're within the boundaries and extension of the lines within the court. So again, if they're in the even court, the right-hand court, you have the sideline to their right, you have the center line to their left, and you have the baseline before them. They need to be within that imaginary boundary. They can't be stepping on the sideline or to the extension of that sideline. So the imaginary extension that would go past that sideline, if you're following what I'm saying, is there. If they are outside of that with a foot touching the pavement or the court or the playing surface, more properly called, when they strike the ball, that would be a fault. All right? They're not in position. They must have 1 foot behind the baseline, touching the ground at the time the ball is hit. So the second foot could have been outside the court boundary, but at the time they make contact with the paddle, with the ball, they lift that trailing foot that was outside and touching the playing surface outside the boundary of the sideline, but they lift it. It's no longer in touching. That's a perfectly legal serve as long as the other one is behind the baseline. It's not one you're going to find too often. The same thing is true of the center line. They can't be over the center line, extension of that center line. They need to be within that nice rectangular area of the court. You're not going to see that too often. What you will see, of course, is foot faults where their toe goes over the baseline when they're making contact with the ball. If it goes over after contact has been made, no problem. But if it's at the point of contact, then it's a fault. I'll point out another thing through experience that you come to realize. Early in the morning, late in the day, the sun is low and it casts a shadow. And if that shadow is behind that person, it makes their foot a little bit longer and it darkens the line. And you have to be careful that their foot is not in contact with that line or the non-volley zone line in that situation. It needs to be in contact, not just appear to be. That toe or that foot needs to make contact with those lines before it is a fault. The drop serve, you see it in red here, propelled. So if there's any energy applied to a drop serve, the new provisional drop serve, if there's any energy applied to the ball on its release, that would be a fault. If it's not visible to either yourself or the receiving team, that would be a reserve. You need to really watch that one because you don't want to be giving reserves because that person who might have served it might have got an ace. And then the receiver says, I didn't see it. So if there is absolutely no reason for that person not to have seen the release, I would be wanting to talk to them about that. All right? Because you don't want to, again, disadvantage the receiver or the server who gets an ace, and that's taken away because somebody says, I didn't see the release. So if there's no reason that he couldn't see the release, and that should be pretty straightforward from where you're standing to make sure there's nothing between the server and the receiver and that's blocking their view, then there's no reason for that call. Visually follow the ball to the receiving court, watching for any short serve that do not clear the no volley zone and the no volley zone lines. All right, again, this is key to your responsibilities. Nobody else is making this call but you. So you need to see that ball if it's short and whether it touches that line on the non-volley zone line and the court or it's past it. You need to make that call. And like all line calls, if you're unsure whether it touches it or not, you have to be able to make the call. So if you're not sure, it's in. Okay, it's in. Can't call a ball out unless it is clearly seen out. Now, what I think it's going to probably come up here, but I think it's quite timely to identify it. So while you're watching that non-volley zone line with one of the new rules that's come in, that ball now on the serve can hit the top of the net. What would have granted a let serve is no longer valid. There's no let serves anymore. So the ball hits the top of the net, touches that net, as long as it goes into, without touching the non-volley zone line and is otherwise good in the receiver's court, that serve is good. But now it brings on extra meaning that that ball can hit a pretty good hit on that net, jump up, and you must identify whether it's gone into the court without touching the non-volley zone or not before you call it a fault or just allow it to be played.
Hey, Al, I want to back you up to 29.
Go ahead.
I've got 3 different questions that we might as well address right now. Can the server lean across the center line and serve into the court?
What
Location of the paddle when he hits the ball, does that have an effect on the serve being legal or not?
Yeah, I'll just address that then, the first question. So yeah, by my explanation, that should already pretty well given you the answer to that. As long as the person is standing behind the baseline, foot not touching outside the boundaries and extensions of the sidelines and the center line, then that hit is legal. So yes, the paddle can overextend across the center line or outside of the baseline or the sideline, no problem. It's so one-dimensional here is what we're talking about. We're not talking about it having height as well. So as long as you're within those boundaries, it's good.
The drop serve, does it matter where the ball drops?
Yeah, we're going to talk about drop serves. We'll get into that.
Okay, and then you'll also get into who saw it or who didn't see it scenario?
Well, we just talked about that there, where the release must be seen by the referee and or the player, right?
What does the referee say when he doesn't see it?
They would just simply call time and reserve. Did not see a release.
But if the referee sees it and the receiver didn't, then can the receiver call it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where I'm saying, that's where the referee's got to be really on your toes here. I said to Linda, we had a conversation on this yesterday, that I can't really imagine a situation where how are you going to hide that ball, the release, from the receiver who's right across from you? I have yet to see that one. I can't imagine that yet, but you know what? It's probably going to happen. So you just have to be very aware of that one. And, you know, and if you're holding that ball out here like that and you're letting it go and it's going to drop in front of you to hit it, how are you hiding that from the person who's directly opposite you? Don't know. All right. Any others, Walter?
No, somebody says their partner's gonna stand in the way so you can't see it, but we'll find ways to hide it. And ways to try to hide it.
Well, yeah, I don't know why. I mean, again, it's always been the case in pickleball where there's no surprise serves. You know, we're going to announce the score and you have the ability to serve after that's happened, and it's not a surprise. Here it comes. Be ready. And now, you know, with taking away the service motion has changed at that, you know, that's no longer in vogue where the score or once the score is called that the service motion can't start. It's now you can't hit the ball. So be ready that that ball is going to come at you as soon as that referee probably has completed that scoring, gets that 1 or a 2 out. That ball might be arriving, but that's where the referee has to be watching. And when they say 4, 3, 2, then you hear a hit, a ball with paddle, then that's legal. If you go 4, 3, 2, that's a fault. And you just have to be watching that server more closely now and listening for using the ears to listen for that contact with the ball.
I think we can go back to slide 30 now.
Okay, thank
Covered
you.
it.
Oh, that's 31. How'd they get there? There we go. Serve timing. Serving the ball before the complete score has been called is a fault. The serve is defined as the initial strike of the ball to start the rally. Okay. I think we covered that fairly well. 10-second rule. Any 10-second violation results in a fault against the server. All right. So after you have called the score, what I do, you don't start your stopwatch. I don't even start counting. We usually, you know, call the score, and within 2 or 3 seconds, the server serves. And you're doing this for, you know, game in, game out, match after match on a day. Then all of a sudden you'll get the person who wants to push the limit. And you call the score and nothing happens. And nothing happens. So at that point, I'm going 5, 6, and then I start counting. I used to start giving a visual to let them know that I was counting, but that now could be construed as coaching, and I will no longer be doing any visual. So you've got to be counting. I'll relate an incident I had down at Nationals last year where I had a fellow that took me to a 9 count each and every time before he served. He never served at 8, and he never got called a fault. So his count, he knew my timing and my cadence, and he was bang on each and every time. And I'm talking every point. So at that point, once you get past that first 5 seconds, you just have to, you know, figure that was 5 seconds, and then you can start counting 6, 7. Normally the ball will get hit. In the odd time, somebody's going to take you up to 8 and 9. And if they, you know, they're not done by 10, it used to be if the service motion didn't start on that 9th call or at 9, if it didn't start before you got to 10, then it was a fault. Now the service motion can start and it can still be a fault if you get to 10 before that paddle hits the ball. So again, this is a different point in time that 10-second violation is made if the ball is not served prior to the 10 seconds being counted off by yourself. And you simply call time violation. Too long, second server, side out. Here's where we're talking for the first time, although we've already covered it. A served ball may clear or touch the net and must clear the no volley zone and the no volley zone lines. The served ball touching the receiver or the receiver's partner before landing is a point for the serving team, even if the partner is clearly standing out of bounds. Doesn't matter where anybody is standing. If the ball that is served hits somebody before landing into the court, it's a fault for the serving team, against the receiving team, a point for the serving team. During play, you want to make sure you call every fault immediately, loudly, and confidently. Again, speaks to your professionalism when you go out there and you go on the court. The players are observing you at every point, and they're watching how you speak. They're watching how you call. They're watching everything you do, and their confidence will grow in you, and they will be paying more attention to what you say if they know what you're doing is correct. So coming out there, making immediate calls, making them loudly so that there's no question about it. Believe me, when I yell time or I yell out, people stop. They don't question it. Just because I have that loud voice on that court, and that it helps so much. So I can't tell you, you can't be a whispering fairy out there if you want to be, in charge of the court. And confidence in the call that you're making. And again, you can only have confidence in the call that you're making if you thoroughly know the rules. And again, you're not going to thoroughly know the rules until you read them a number of times. You refereed a bunch of games, and then you've gone back into the rule book, reread it, and reread it. So there's your challenge. Followed by, okay, whatever the situation is, when it happens, you're going to say point, second server, or side out. Those are the options for the serving team. During play, when a volley is hit from close to the non-volley zone, no volley zone, do not follow the flight of the ball. You're focusing on the no volley zone for faults until momentum is under control. This is one of the ones that is most difficult to teach the novice referee, right? Everybody wants to follow the ball and where it's going. As the referee, you can't afford to do that. Your primary responsibility is not making line calls, not watching where that ball hits. It's watching the people who hit the ball, and whether if they volleyed it and they were moving towards that non-volley zone, then you must follow that person's momentum to see that it is arrested and comes to a full and complete controllable stop before going into the non-volley zone. If they continue into the non-volley zone after volleying a ball, it is a fault if they don't arrest their motion. If they come to a complete and full stop and are not unbalanced, they're in there and somebody dinks one over and they have to lunge forward and go in there, that's not a fault. That's in control. Okay? So that is, again, one of your absolutely prime responsibilities, watching people after they have, before and after they have volleyed a ball. I'll tell you again, Nationals last year, there was, I can't remember the certified referee's name, but it was a woman, and she was center court, and she got one of the professional players twice in one match for illegal volley. He jumped off the non-volley zone. His toe was on the non-volley zone line, no volley zone line, and jumped up into the air and backwards to hit a ball, and called fault twice because he had taken off from just being in an illegal position by his toe on that non-volley zone line prior to hitting it. Had not established back into the court first before he jumped. He jumped from that illegal position to the ball and hit it. So that was a very good get on 2 occasions. And of course, it's a heck of a player that's going to do that, right? When you're jumping backwards up in the air and be able to hit a good volley. So you're focusing on until that whole momentum is under control. If the ball bounces prior to being hit, non-volley zone faults are not in effect. So you don't have to worry about it. As soon as the ball bounces, You just put that completely out of your head. Not easy to do when they're going volley, 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 and then all of a sudden it bounce volley and their foot's in the court and you call it. Then you'd simply have to say referee error, sorry, and restart that rally. Watching the non-volleys only, as we've already said, it's a prime responsibility. I think you might have gotten that point. Score sheets. It's all about leaving tracks for recreation later. This is a very important element and must be second nature to you when doing the score sheet. Every mark you put on the score sheet, you're able to track, and it tells you a story, so that if you have a question, you call the players to center court, you look at your score sheet, and you can hopefully identify what transpired, whether it was a first or a second server, whether it was the correct server, correct receiver, based on the score, based on the tracks that you have put on that score sheet. And that takes a bit of practice, believe me. It takes a bit of getting used to and experience. You should be able to look back and confirm what the play has happened, how to recreate score. Yes, do it right, do it well, and do it every time consistently. Consistency is what we're looking for here. You want to make sure when you're moving that the numbered peg from 1 or a 2, you've got to say to yourself, I'm moving this from 1 to 2. Because if you just simply grab it and move it over and forget to turn it, we have now gone from first server to first server under a different name. And I'm looking around at some faces and referees, and they're going, yeah, I've done that. And if you're not acknowledging everything you're doing and seeing it, you don't know whether you've done it right. And therefore you start questioning yourself. And if a player questions you and you don't know, you've got a mess. And that's where you need to, again, be able to read back on your score sheet, which we'll just talk about in a minute. Record every point as it occurs and use the appropriate diagonals in the score boxes based on the server. So again, the first server, person who is identified as the first server, if they make a point, you're going to put in a /, right? Top right to lower left. The second server, if they're making the point, top left to lower right. So it comes down in an angle in that direction. That's what you have to do every time on the score sheet in the numbered box, putting in one of those slashes. So here's a sample of a score sheet, and it even has the number zeros in it. It's a little bit out of focus here, isn't it? Hopefully that's not my eyes. What's important, however, here is that Mary Smith is serving. We have the first server of the match made a point, and it was when they were not the second server, right? So the score was 0-0-2 at the start. They got a point, and that goes in. Then they had a side out, and now they come to Mary Smith is serving, and she's the first server, or sorry, Jim Smith, sorry, in this case is the first server because the score is odd, right? So Jim Smith would be the first server, and he makes a point. So we put a / in that direction. That team makes another point. The third point is marked off, and the score now is 3 whatever, and it's 3 whatever 1, right? So we know that. If they hit the net on the next one, well, we won't go there. We'll just let our slides go to the next one. And so now there was a side out after his, or not a side out, a change of server after the third shot by that team. And now Mary Smith is serving, and she subsequently that team gets 2 points while she is the second server. So the score is 5 whatever 2 at this point. Okay, and what?
Hi, Al. It's Lisa Weir from St. John. Can I just clarify something?
Yep.
So the clothespin with the number 2 indicating that Mary is the second server, correct?
Correct, on this sheet, yes.
But she's circled, so wouldn't that make her the first server, or is this just because it was an odd score going into it, so he served first?
Let me just make sure, I won't answer your question. I'm going to go over and make sure we all understand the principles here. Good question, because this is where a lot of people get confused. At the start of the match, Mary Smith is identified as the starting server. not the first server. She is the starting server for that team. Okay? The score is 0-0. So the score is even. So in fact, even though it's 0-0-2, and she's identified as the second server for that purpose, she is the first server on that side to be serving. But it's always at the second server status, if you like. So she is the starting server. The score is even. Because it's the start of the game, they only get one serve. She would be identified as the second server in that peculiar situation. Okay? Does that explain it?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Okay, good. So, yeah, I was going to say that we're never mind. I won't say what I was going to say. Confuse things. So now what we're doing here is we're identifying by this slide where Jim Smith was serving as the first server. And when we moved the score sheet to Mary Smith, we had a fault, and the referee would say, fault, second server. You now grab the pin, you turn it, and you now put it over Mary Smith's name. So that's what we're doing, is we're just grabbing that pin and moving it over. All right, so here's my clothes peg. So you grab it here and you turn it and put it down onto the score sheet. How you do that has to be second nature. I've done a lot of practice with people out on the court, and they're holding that score sheet, you know, here, and they're grabbing the pin, their hands are reversed, they're all over the place. You have to do that smoothly and proficiently each and every time. So hold that where it makes the most sense. The other point that I can make at this stage is that your clothes pin, your referee pin, your numbered pin, needs to be one where you're comfortable to it. I've seen a lot of other pins which have a strong spring to it. They've got a wider space between. It's not as easy to grab each time and to make that move. So you want something you can quickly grab, turn around, and place back on there seamlessly. It needs to be seamless because you need to do all of that before the players get the ball into position, and you need to know the score. You need to know what you're going to call. You need to have checked the server, the receiver, the server, their partners. You need to know they got the ball. They need to check the bands, and you need to be able to call the score as quick as they need it called to get that flow of the game going. So you've got to do a lot. So that score sheet and that pin have to be the least of your worries, is what I'm saying. It takes practice. After making vertical side out slash, let's just go back here. No, sir. So on a side out, we're going to show you here, but you're going to make a vertical line straight up and down between whatever number it is at the side out. So it could be between the 3 and the 4, right on the line. The new score sheets, by the way, have got dotted lines in between the boxes now. They're not a solid line, so that when you put your pencil mark down there, it needs to be a nice identified vertical line so that you know that that was a side out. So that when you turn that back over, when that team is now serving, you're looking first at that side out mark that is there on the score sheet to identify that the previous score is at odd or even. So if that is there between the 3 and the 4, you know that the non-starting server of that team is serving. So the odd server is serving. The person without the band should be serving. So you're going to put the number 1 peg on the person that is not circled. That's what you need to be able to identify in a split second on turning that paper over. So is that absolutely clear? Remember, I'm looking at your faces. I need some expressions out there, Alden.
Show the next slide.
I will. I'm just waking Alden up there. All right, so here it is here between the 0 and the 1. There's your vertical mark. And because it's a 0, there's no scores being called. Mary Smith is still serving. So that tells me that this could tell me, for example, in doing tracking back, that Mary Smith had served at the start of the match. They didn't get a point. It went to the other team, and we're now coming back to Mary Smith to serve. Whether it's the second or third time that could happen where they didn't score a point, we don't know. we don't care. We're not going to identify that. We don't need to identify it, how many times that she's been the starting server and haven't scored. We're not into statistics. We're only wanting to know, is the score odd or even, for to identify where we're going to put the pin, or the referee's numbered pin. So in this case, no score, score still even. Mary Smith then, well, this is the start of the match, so she's a 2. So if that had gone back a subsequent time, she would be the first server, right? Good. Took me a second to get there, Alden. Okay. Completely clear? Good. Now here's one in the middle of the match. So what we're finding out here is that Mary Smith was serving as the second server, and I can go back and say she got the 4th and got the 5th point, and then there was a side out, and we're now going to flip the paper to the other team, because we know we're not coming in at this point, because the person who would be serving, if the other team is coming back and we're coming into this, Jim Smith would be serving at this point. So that's, we know that's a side out at this point, and we're going to turn the clipboard upside down and go to the other team and put our peg on the other side based on the score. Okay, hopefully that's abundantly clear to you. That's how to mark the score sheets and identify tracks so that you can identify first server points, second server points, and side outs. And again, probably the most important thing on there is that vertical line. You can't forget to put that on at side out. Before you grab your close peg and you've said side out, you then get your pencil, draw a line down between the score at the point of the last score. You then take your peg, you take it off of the sheet, you turn your score sheet around, you make sure that the clip is facing towards the serving team that is serving, and you identify whether the score is odd or even, and you put it, the number 1, over the person who is the correct server based on the score. So if the score is even, then your starting server of the match, the person who is circled, is going to be who is number 1 server. If the score is odd, then it's going to go over the non-banded person is going to be the first server, and non-circled person. Completely clear, I'm sure. I'm hoping, that is. Okay, good. Thanks, Angela. So timeout procedure. This is a very important thing for you to get down. It's one of the things that we look for all the time. This needs to be done in the proper sequence and identifying all these different steps. And there are a number of steps to go into and the routine to follow on when a timeout is called. Acknowledge the team requesting the timeout. So the team on my left, the serving team, the receiving team has called a timeout. At that point, you activate your timer. So you just click it and it'll start counting down. Announce the score. Score is 4-3-2, 1 minute. Move to the center of the court to avoid interaction with either team or the spectators. So you slowly start walking that way, and you start annotating your score sheet with the timeout score in the appropriate box for the team that called the timeout. Advise the players. So you're watching the players the whole time. If they are not moving towards their ready positions and they're still drinking or in their corners, you advise them at 15 seconds, you advise it regardless of where they are. You simply say 15 seconds. If working with line judges, at that point, you turn to the line judges. Line judges ready, please, and get their attention. And at that point, they should be raising their hands, ready. And you get all 4 of them to verify that, or 6, depending on what you're using. If player has left the court with a paddle, you re-inspect it before resuming play. So you ask them, can you bring your paddle, please? And you give it a quick rub, make sure it's the same one that was in the court before. If it's a different one, make sure that it's a legal paddle. It's not rough, and you go through that whole paddle inspection routine. You assume your refereeing position by the end of the timeout. So you slowly, in that 15 seconds, if nothing else has happened, you're slowly just stepping back into position so that you're 3 to 5 to 6 feet behind the net post. And at time -0, you announce, oh, sorry, you do tell the teams that, you know, they have the receiving team, you have 1 timeout remaining. Serving team, you have 2 timeouts remaining. Time in, you announce the score, and at that point you start your 10-second count like you do every other time if and when required. And obviously, failure to get the ball into play after 10 seconds is a fault. So you need to really go through that one step by step and make sure that you do it almost in exactly the same sequence. Sequence isn't hugely important, but you need to get it down to get it as close to that sequence as you can, because that's the proper sequence. And make sure you follow all those steps. Timeouts cannot be used to delay the start of the first game or the start of the match. All right, so you got 3 players down at the court. That one player is looking for their partner and they're nowhere in sight. He can't turn around to you and say, we'll take our first timeout. We'll take our second timeout. That's not legal at the start of a match. Okay, so we'll get into delaying the start of a match and what the penalties are and what the forgivenesses are and what you can do. Timeouts can be taken between games number 2 and number 3, a best of 3 to 11 format. And if somebody's got to go to the washroom between games, you've got 2 minutes, right? There's a 2-minute automatic break between games. They can ask to take their timeouts and leave the court, go to the washroom. And if they're back before the 2 minutes has expired, then they haven't used any timeout, no problem. If they're back with 2 minutes and 2 seconds into a timeout, or 2 minutes and 2 seconds, they're into their first timeout. They're allowed to start play right away or to continue up to that 3-minute point, whatever their preference is. But they have used, at that point, will have been deemed to have used a timeout. They can request, yep, we talked about the both required 1 ring, yes. So the other one, if the other timeout hasn't been gone into, it's there for later use. Can be called after the score is called now, right? So timeout can be called after the score is called and cannot be called after the ball is served. And so as soon as that ball or the paddle makes contact with the ball, a timeout, if somebody calls a timeout, that would be a fault. Okay, so that's something else that you have to be on top of. So that's your new point in time. You're going 4-3-2 and nothing's happened. That person is making a swing, they make contact with it and somebody goes, timeout. Then you would simply say fault, point, and carry on. Mark the game score in the appropriate timeout box. Okay, that's important. We'll show you how to do that in a second. Separate the team score using the diagonal slash. So if the score is 4-3-2, then we're going to use the backward slash. If it's 4-3-1, then it's going to be a forward slash just to separate the numerals is what we're talking about there. That's always the format that you use. You no longer lay it out like a 4-3-2. It's going to be 4/ one way or the other 2. So here we have it. The score is 5-4. I'll have to remember that one. So it's 5-4-1. So the thing that we know about this score that's marked here is that it was the serving team that called the timeout, which you don't see. That would say, I would say that's less than 20% of the time you're going to see a serving team ask for a timeout. 80% or more is going to be the receiving team is going to be calling and wanting to slow play down and stop the server from getting more points. And so they're going to call the timeout. And so we know this is right side up. So it was the serving team that called this timeout. Here is what you're going to see more often is that you have the score sheet in front of you and the receiving team asks for a timeout. So you do not turn the score sheet right side up to mark it on the receiving team's side of the score sheet. You leave it upside down and you simply fill in this case, 7-5-1 was their first timeout. Their second timeout was called at 10-5, and it was the second server at that time. And that's when they called it. So they haven't scored a point in since they had the other team had 7, and now the other team's up at 10. They're about to win the match, and they take their final timeout. Okay, that clear to everybody? So when it's right side up, it's the serving team that had requested it. When it's upside down, written on the score sheet, you know they were the receiving team that did it, and you separate it. The thing that you're seeing nicely in here now, you no longer have the number 1 and number 2 to identify the first and the second timeouts. Well, it'd be the other way around. This would have been a number 1 and this would be a number 2. It just cluttered up that box so that it was more difficult to read your score that you were putting in there. So they dropped the numbers. So that makes it a lot nicer. You announce the at between games. So you would same sort of thing now as a timeout procedure, but this is the procedure for time between games. So you announce final score. So you would go point 11-9. Okay, and then you would start your timing device and say to them, 2 minutes, please. You have 2 minutes. You collect and make sure that you get control of the ball so that it's not kicking around the court or that the wrong team has it. You move yourself to the center of the court again and prepare your score sheet for the next game. And you do have a little prep in this one. You have to draw, you should be drawing horizontal lines through the first match and all the unused numbers that are there, and through the timeout boxes as well. What you want to make sure is that you don't, in the next game, if say the team got 0, the team that didn't win, obviously, if they got 0 and you don't draw your line through it, you very well could put the second game's scores into that first game scores, and now you've got a mess. So you want to make sure you don't do that by just taking a pencil, drawing lines through all the first game scores, and knowing now that we're working on the second middle score for the next game. Circle or lightly shade the box containing the final point and scored by each team. So we'll just point that out to you, I'm sure. So what we're doing, this team got 11, this team got 5. It happens to be right side up for this. So you would just score out the rest of the numbers not used and through the timeout boxes, and you can even go through the technical warning box as well. Over here, you would do the same thing, put a line right through the whole thing there so we don't get mixed up. And then we would circle the 11 and the 5 or shade it in. Those are both acceptable. And that's what we want the operations desk or the tournament director's desk will be looking for. When you turn the score sheet in, they're looking for these numbers and they must identify it. We'll show you where you write it in here at the end of the match towards the winning team. So that's working your way towards the final of the match. This is just the first game that's finished. So we've done everything correctly there, those 2 things. Okay. Rotate the clipboard now so that it's facing the serving team. So you must take your score sheet out of the clipboard. You turn it around 180 degrees, you put it back in, and then you make sure that clip now is facing again the serving team, whatever side whatever end of the court they're on. Place the server clip number 2 above the starting server's name for the other team. Yes. So at 1 minute and 45 seconds, you notify both teams, 15 seconds remaining. And again, when I'm doing that, it's noisy on pickleball courts. I don't know whether you've ever noticed that with the PA system going on and all the play and everything. So I make sure that when I'm saying 15 seconds remaining, I'm going to my right to let them know, and I'm going to my left to let them know so that my voice is broadcasting towards them. And you want an acknowledgement from them. Okay, so I go 15 seconds remaining, and if they don't move, don't hear me, I make sure blue team 15 seconds, and you get an acknowledgement from them. Return to the referee position. Again, you slowly walk backwards to your position, watching your players at all times to see what they're doing. Game may begin early if all players are in agreement. So if you're back there, say 30 seconds has transpired and they start moving into position, you start backing up. They may get there and talk. You don't say anything. If they're all standing there now and looking at you, I simply look at them and say, all players ready to proceed? And if you get acknowledgement that yes, you don't get somebody saying no, then say, time in, 4, 3, 2. And just call the score. That's if you don't have line judges. Okay, return the ball to the serving team. Now, obviously, we had to do that before we called the score. But you've got possession of that ball is what we're wanting you to do now. I usually go over and lay that on the serving team's side of the court so that they can pick it up and begin right at that time. If the third game reminds players of upcoming end switch, so in the third game, you would simply say, third game, we'll switch ends at 6, and away we go. At the end of the 2 minutes, call time in, and the score, even if the players are not in position. As in all instances of this, when you call 15 seconds, you watch that 15 seconds, and when it strikes 0, you simply call the score, regardless of their readiness or not. Okay, again, this is tournament directors are wanting that game to start on time and finish on time. So that's one of your mandates, that you have to monitor those times and you have to start the games promptly, especially after timeouts. Timeouts are 1 minute, side ends are 2 minutes. They're not 1 minute and 10 seconds. They're not 2 minutes and 5 seconds, right? They are 1 minute and 2 minutes. You start right at that point in time. Start your 10-second count and failure. Yes, we know that. Look. Go back here. Now I've gone too far again. Before removing the serving clip, mark 1 or a 2 at the end change next to the current server's name based on the server clip number. Rotate the score sheet, yes, and replace the server clip based on 1 or 2. So again, here we are. This is an end change procedure. So what we want to identify here is that this team, Mary Smith and Jim Smith, have scored their 6th point just ahead of the other team who has 5, and we're going to switch ends. Jim Smith is serving at 6-5-1, correct? So what's important here is that you don't put a box here. You just put the number 1, a 1 just beside Jim Smith's name, so that when you remove the numbered peg and you turn this sheet 180 degrees over on the clipboard, and now it's on the other side, when we go to replace that peg, the numbered pin, we know exactly where it goes. We don't have to guess who was the first server or the second server. We put a 1 there, and that's where we put the number pin. So important. I've removed that and going, oh my God, who was serving? So, you know, that's how you get yourself out of that position. Now, this is not necessarily a best practice. A lot of referees are doing this now. We're shading in the triangle box to identify which side got to 6 first. And again, it's just a track on the score sheet, because I've been in games where the team got 6 and it was nothing. And this team finally, after many, many rallies, gets 6 points. And you almost want to switch sides again because they got to 6. And of course, it's right side up. And you're seeing the triangle as you fill in their 6 point. And you've forgotten that we've already switched. So this allows you to identify, hey, we've already switched. We've shaded in the other team. They got there first. Okay. You might think that's funny, but it happens out there. So anything that you can put on that score sheet to help identify where you're at so that you know where you're going is not a bad thing. What you don't need to do is you don't need to put down the score here. And you would never write it in that format, as I've said earlier. So Walter, we're going to have to just clean this one up. If you were going to put down the score, what I was taught to begin with, not a 1 or a 2 went here, you would simply write the score here. So I would have put 6 and a slash in the direction of the 1 here, in that direction, and a 5 underneath it. So that's what I would have put there rather than just the number 2. But best practices is now saying we want you to put a 1 or a 2. Simply put a 1 or a 2 there. It doesn't really matter what the score was at the turnaround. It just matters that you can put the pin back in the proper place, the number peg. Okay. At 45 seconds, loudly notify both teams of the 15 seconds remaining. Assume the referee position in 1 minute, and you state time in, and call the score and start your 10-second count. And failure to serve is a fault. That's the same procedure. You're going to get nauseated with that, but that's what you have to do each and every time. You follow that complete cycle. At completion of the match, you announce point, game, match, 11-5. And you go, winners, would you sign this, please? So at completion of the match, this is important because, again, as I pointed out, any mistakes that you make on the court, go to the operations desk, and this can mess up the tournament quite substantially when we start promoting the wrong people to medal matches and other people have gone home. So you can really help out the tournament here by doing your proper work. So you circle or shade the final points on the score sheet for each team. You write winners by the winning team's name and circle both. So you've got the circle around the starting server for that team. You're now taking your pencil and you're putting a circle around both names. Nice big circle. And in that circle or beside that circle, you write winners. And that you do this with the winners' names being upright on the score sheet. So you now turn it so that that score sheet is right side up for the team that wins. Doesn't matter which way the clipboard clip is facing. It just matters that we have the team that won, their name is up top, and everything now is being written so that it's not upside down, right? Then you record scores of all the games in the order they occurred on the center score lines and with the winner's scores identified first. You mark the game scores accurately and legibly and have the winning team member, one of the winning team members, confirm they are the winners, the scores are correct, and provide their initials. Important. You recheck your work before you turn it in, and without delay, you return the clipboard back to the referee desk. An incorrect player or position error may be corrected until the score sheet is turned in. This is a 2021 rule change. So it's a point in time situation where if in that last point, there was a wrong server or an incorrect server, and that they come up to you after the score sheet's been signed and everything's done and everybody's gone away and say, hey, ref, I think there was a problem with that last point. They had the wrong server. If you can go into your score sheet and look at it and identify that they're correct, you call everybody back to the court and you would change it. And they would take that point away and we would play that last point. So they have until the operations desk or the referee desk takes possession of it. So I would say as soon as I throw that score sheet down on their desk to look at, I could be standing there in line ready to turn mine in and be tapped on the shoulder and have to go back. If I put it on that desk, that's the point in time where it's no longer retrievable and it's done. Okay, everybody understand that one? Okay. So let's just look at a completed score sheet. So there's Mary Smith, identified as the starting server. Now to identify them as the winning team, we take a pencil and circle both of their names. And we write winners in there somewhere, right there where it's very noticeable. We have now circled 11-5, 5-11, and 11-7. So we write it down, 11-5, 5-11, 11-7, and we get one of the Smiths to sign an initial here. That score sheet is good to turn in. You will notice we don't have to put a line through the remaining unused portions of the third game. Doesn't matter. It's not consequential. Everything's neat and tidy and done. One thing we haven't mentioned, and no point in here, is at the start of the, when we were doing the introductions and we were getting the score sheet ready, we failed to talk about identifying the starting server and the side in which they selected. So let me go back to that one. Okay, so on the score sheet, we showed a 1 or a 2. And whether they got it right or the other team got it wrong, Mary and Jim Smith chose to serve first, or the other team said they would receive. But so they got to serve first. So we put down an X in the box for the first server. By default, in a match of 3, we can identify that if there is a third game in a match to 3, best of 3, we're going to identify them as the server in the third game, if and when it happens. By, again, default, we know that the receiving team over here is going to serve the second game. So you put an X in there. What I have always done, and again, not necessarily best practice, but again, it's so important to get this part right before going on the court, that if the other team, you ask them, what end of the court would you like? And they'll say, I'll go over here. So you've identified where you're standing, right? So if you know what net post you're standing and they point to your left, then what I do is I would put an L over here somewhere by this team's name, just knowing they're starting the match to my left. That way, when they're finishing warming up and doing all the stuff that they have to do to finish their 5 minutes, I can step back now and I go check their names. I check what they're wearing. I check the first server, and I check that I have, most importantly, my clipboard clip facing the serving team for the start of the match. And my number 2 peg lined with that starting server. I'm good to go. They're warming up. I've done all my work. I now can pay attention to my stopwatch. And when 5 minutes comes up, I call time and call the score. Okay. You now know how to keep score.
Al, can you reinforce starting server versus first server?
Okay, I will. I'll just finish this one here. This is a game to 15 that went extra points. So we simply, it goes to 21. So they simply went 16-14. They won by 2. And this team switched ends at 8. And you can go back and see where the side outs were, and you know whether it was the first or the second server. Again, just what Walter is asking here, when you're identifying first and second server, you're not identifying it for statistical purposes to say that Mary Smith made all these points because she was the starting server. That means she made all these ones. That doesn't work that way. The starting server is different than the first server of after a side out. Okay, the starting server of the match is identifying who is wearing the band, the first server identification marking, right? So that they're always even in the right-hand court. The first server for a rally that is coming up is the person who is going to serve next based on the score. So again, if the score is even and we're turning it over here, right? And the Smiths are going to serve at 16, if that's where they are, then we know that the number 1 peg here is going to be under Mary Smith's name because the score is even. If the score was 15 and it was a side out from the other team and we're coming in and there was a vertical line between the 15 and the 16 and the 16 score doesn't show here, then we know that Jim Smith is going to be the starting server for this rally. Or the first server, sorry, shouldn't say starting, should have said first server for this rally. So starting server is the person who's starting the match right there. The first server is the first server of each rally, and it can interchange between either one based on the score.
Can we flip back to slide 58?
Just got to get rid of my view of people so I can see my numbers. Obviously went too far. Yes.
So question here is this third game. Is Jim Smith the legitimate first server here?
So yeah, the score when he came in over here was 5. So he would have been the first server. And then he scored a point. Right? So we had the side out. So if we didn't have the 6th score filled in here, right? When we put this, we turned this sheet over from being from the Browns, and we turn it around to allow the Smiths to serve. So we're pointing the score sheet to our left, so that the clamp for the or the clip for the clipboard is facing the team to the left. We turn it around. We look at this for this vertical line right away is the first thing we look for, and it's telling us that the last score was made by a second server. Whoever that was, we could identify it, but right now we're just saying it's the second server who had made it. There was a side out. We're coming in. The score is odd, so that Jim Smith must be the first server.
Okay,
I'm not seeing a lot of expression, acknowledgement out there.
no, I've got one person questioning, and I had to go back here and make sure the slide was correct.
I know, but I'm watching a bunch of faces, and they're all stone cold out there.
That's correct.
Hi,
The
can you hear me?
Ray, if you still don't get it, we'll private email on this one afterwards. The slide is correct. All right. Anybody else got a question on this before Al goes back on? Says Denise, but that's not your name. Go ahead.
No, it's Danny. At the very start of the match, when you start the game, Mary Smith is wearing the bracelet, right?
Let's get our terminology correctly. She's wearing the starting server identification,
Right.
often referred to as the server band, but it's the first server identification.
But she's going to be number 2.
She at the start of a match, she's going to be the number is the numbered peg is always going to identify that as a second server at the start of a match.
It's going to be 002.
Right.
But the receiving team, the receiver, the start of the game, is going to be number 1. So she's going to be serving 2 against 1.
No, you don't number the receiving team. All that you're looking for is where are the bands, and that's again we're going to get into a stacking situation here, and stacking confuses referees, and they go, "Oh my God, I'm going to run for cover. I don't want to do a stacking team." It's easy doing a stacking. Well, it's a little bit more difficult, but it's fairly easy doing a stacking team because all you're doing is paying attention to who's wearing that starting server band or identification.
Okay, so, but he's going to be wearing the band, right?
So as long as the score is even on both sides, then it's band to band.
Right. So he is going to be wearing the band, and he will be their first server, right?
I don't know who he is.
The receiving team.
Ralph.
He's going to be on the right side.
That's right.
So he's going to be the receiver of the very first Mary's first serve.
Mhm.
Yep. That's right.
So he is going to be on the right side. So he's going to be the very first server of the receiving team.
Correct.
Correct?
So on that peg, he will be number 1 on that clothespin.
Well, again, what we're getting confused with here, I'm trying to look and do 2 things here. What we're getting confused with is the starting server based on the match and the first server during a rally to start a rally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So a starting server is the starting server for the match. And that's who the person you circle and identify for that team. Okay. So the starting server is always in the right-hand court when the score is even. The first server is serving from the right-hand court and can be either person with or without the band.
Oh,
Aha. That, I'm glad you asked the question because again, so important to understand this concept. You can't keep score. You can't get it straight in your head until you get this. So it's something you got to work at. It's something you got to understand, and you can only do that through practice. And again, get into one of the websites and go on and look at a gold medal match or any match, but you know, gold medal matches are more fun to watch, and watch the referee do it and identify who is the first server and starting server for each team. And so you get some practice at doing that.
okay, thank you.
I'm trying to find my, here it is here. So again, to speak to it right here with the diagram is far easier. Starting server at the start of the match for each team is identified by wearing the identification band. So that's who has it here. This is the score is even, or it's the start of the match, doesn't matter. But we know that the score is even at this point and everybody's in the right place. We know this team is serving because they're both back at the baseline. This side has a player at the net and the receivers in their position back here. They're not stacking, they're ready to go. So the score is even to even. Again, if the score was even to odd and they were lined up this way, you would be waiting for this server to serve the ball. And if the ball was served good, as soon as this person made contact with their paddle on that ball, you yell fault, incorrect receiver, point. Okay? I can't explain it any better.
Al, it's old in here. I've gone through this with a number of people, and all the confusion really comes around is that starting server, who really is the first server of the game, but they're referred to as the second server because there isn't another serve after them.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the match is always started. It's the only point where you're going to have the number 2 there at the start of a rally because the start of the game is starting at 0-0-2. They get one serve. That's right.
Correct.
We need to keep that starting server in mind with the band on as we go through and identify who's supposed to be in the right places through the game. So you can't just take it as the first moment of the game. It's important all the way through.
And that's why I had you, when you're doing the introductions, you're identifying that starting server with the circle, with the band, and you're putting down something unique about them. The ponytail, the red shirt, the white hat, the blue hat, the red socks. I don't care what you do, as long as you identify that identification mark with that server band, which will help you, and you only follow that person. I'm not interested in Jim Smith. Mary Smith is the starting server. I'm following where Mary's standing. If the score is odd, I know she's on the left. If the score is even, she's on the right. It's easy. I know if they're stacking and they're both standing in the right-hand court and the score is odd, Mary Smith better not touch the ball.
Yeah, right.
Okay?
Okay, thank you very
Al,
much.
Al, can I say something here? This
Please.
is Julie Shribney.
Hi, Julie.
I think the other thing that might make it a little easier is we get confused because we confuse the serving team with the receiving team and the first and second. The receiving team is never a first or second. The only time you have a first or second server is if your team is serving.
Yeah.
And then your first server will depend on whether your score was odd or even. If the score is even, then the starting server, the person wearing the band or the bracelet or the starting identification, whatever, that person becomes the first server for the serving team if their score was even. If their score is not even, then the person without the serving band will be the first server. So first and second server are terms that are used only for the serving team. They're not ever used for the receiving team. The receiving team is strictly about the band. If the receiving team has an even score, the band is in the right-hand court. If they have an odd score, the band is in the left-hand court. And I think if we try to just separate receiving and serving, it makes it a little bit simpler. But like you say, the best way to do it is hands-on practice.
Yeah.
I hope
Good.
that helps.
I hope, Julie, that you got to somebody that I didn't. That's great.
Just another way of saying it. The more
Yeah.
ways you say it, the better chance you get somebody.
Yeah. Right. Any other questions, Walter, that we want to deal with?
You want to go back and review how to mark a timeout?
If they want me to.
That's it. How you doing for time? I had a
We're
couple
just-
people wanting to drop out because it's 2 hours. I told them you're going till 6 p.m. our time, which is another 5 hours.
You know how to lose people real quick, don't you? All right, let me just find the timeout marking here.
Had you planned 2 hours or 3 hours, Al?
Well, I knew it was going to go over too. I mean, this is about where we were last time when we did it,
Okay.
right about this point. And the next one actually might be closer to 3 hours than really 2 is what we need to tell you for tomorrow when we're dealing with the new rules. And, you know, it really comes down to how quickly you grasp what I'm saying and how many questions there are and what reviews we have to do. So I'm happy to, you know, to stay until we get everything across, and it's up to you.
Are you at a break point? now?
I just want to go back and look at that, but before I do, you asked about the timeout, so I'm just trying to find timeouts here. Because you're right, I mean, they are the next most confusing thing, just to make sure that you get them marked correctly. Timeout, gone too far.
Slides 47 and 48.
My
The
God,
English version or
Isabel.
the French version?
Yeah, but Isabel, you're so good, Isabel. Oh yeah, I can't go back into doing the full page, so we'll just look at it this way. So again, what's important here, the first thing I do in marking a timeout is identifying who's calling it. And if it's the serving team, then we don't have to turn our paper. We don't have to do anything, either server or receiver. We simply go over to the box and I push, first thing I do is put in the slash based on whether it was the first server or the second server who is serving at this time. So we know right now this is a first server and the score is 5-4. So you always write it just like you would be calling it out when we're starting the next point in the rally. So if you're calling the score at 5-4-1, you simply put the diagonal down for the 1, you put the 5 above it and the 4 under it. That's easy. We now want to do a for the receiving team. So the serving team, the sheet is right side up and is facing them. So we simply go to the bottom of the score sheet. On your right hand side, it will be. And there's the boxes for the receiving team. So we would have written, first of all, in the number 1 box, the score was 7-5-1. So we put the diagonals again in that forward slash position. And we write the 7, we write the 5. They call another timeout at 10-5-2. We put the diagonal in the direction. And again, this is always in front of you. It's right on your numbered clip or your clip that you have. And that's why you put it on your nice little clip so that you have that in front of you at all times. Whoops. And there's your number and it shows your diagonal right there. So it's always right in front of you. You don't have to remember which way they go. You have your cheat sheet right on your score sheet at all times. So you simply follow that diagonal and put it in. And then you write the 10 and the 5 above and below the line. Any questions on that?
I have a quick question, Reg from Fredericton. When the first timeout was taken, it was 7-5 for the serving team?
No, this is both the receiving team here. That other one was on the other side. Yeah, sorry, that 5-4, this one on this box was when they were the serving team, yes. This
No,
one here.
I'm referring to the numbers that are written in red, because this is the
This is the receiving team, right? Right here.
correct. It's a receiving team, and
Right.
it's a second server, and the serving team had 7 and the receiving team had 5. Is that correct?
It's not the second server. It's a first server because we're going from top right to bottom left.
Yeah, sorry, you're right there, sorry.
Yep. And yes, the serving team has 7 and the receiving team has 5. So the
Okay.
team that has called the timeout has the 5 points.
Correct.
But we
Now,
don't worry. But we don't worry about that where that's placed. We just write it down simply as we would be calling the score: 7, 5, 1.
Correct. Now, my question is, when the second timeout was called, it's called by the receiving team, correct?
Again, yes.
And if the serving team is on their second server, now if you said it's the way that the score would be called out, the score would actually be 10-5, wouldn't it?
It is.
But okay, but it doesn't go left to right then. It goes simply the 10, the serving
First
team goes on
numbers on the
top.
top.
It's
The
top to bottom.
Serving goes top, bottom. Okay, good. Question answered.
Okay, good.
So do you hear me?
I
Alan?
do.
So when a team is serving and calls a timeout, score sheet and clipboard are right side up.
That's correct.
And when a receiving team calls a timeout, you invert it and go
No.
to the next line.
No,
No, you don't.
it's already inverted.
Looks upside down to me.
Well, it is. So you don't change it. You keep your score sheet in the same direction and you don't turn it at all. All you're doing now is you're filling in the scores with the sheet upside down in the box in the appropriate corner.
Well, it's confusing because the 5-4 in the previous slide was right side up. And in this slide, it's upside down.
Yeah,
And
okay. So let's just talk to that point. So
how
when
did it get from being right side up to upside down if the sheet wasn't inverted?
I say that again?
Okay, on this example, the serving team has called the timeout. The score is 5-4, and it's right side up. On the next slide, if we can go to that one, yeah, it seems apparent that it's the receiving team who has called a timeout, and the score was 7-5 at that point. I don't understand how, if you look below the 7-5, the scores 5-4 got inverted.
Those two 5-4s are not related to each other. One of them, we should change those numbers.
That was in another game. We're just talking here about the second game that's happening, or the second match. Yeah, second game of the match. So don't worry about this down here. We're just looking up here at this one.
Okay, okay. I still don't understand why that's upside down.
This one's upside down?
Yeah.
Well, when they called it, it was when they were serving.
Yeah.
In the first match, or the first game of that match, they called a timeout at 5-4, and they were serving because we know it's right side up. Now we're in the second game of the match, and they've called 2 timeouts when they were receivers.
Right.
I think I see where the confusion is. I think you were assuming that the receiving team called the timeout, and it was actually the serving team that called the timeout, and the sheet has just been flipped over.
Yeah. Yeah, Walter, we may want to just take this out.
But at some point, each team has 2 timeouts, right?
Yes.
What if all 4 timeouts were used? How would you record them?
Pardon me? How would you record it? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Each team has 2 timeouts per game.
Each team, well, that's 4 timeouts that need to be recorded somehow, somewhere.
Well,
let's flip the full score sheet, Alan.
Right, because isn't this just one score sheet for one team, the top or the bottom?
Yes.
Flip the slide 20, Alan,
Here's one here.
or whatever you can find.
Yeah.
Full sheet though.
There it is. There it is here. Is 20 the one to go to?
This works.
Okay. All right. So this better explains it. So right now we have Mary Smith serving. The receiving team over here, one of them calls timeout. So we would not turn this around on our clip. We would simply take our pencil over here, and in the second timeout, we would put down the score as well. In this particular case, it's 11-5. So if that was when the timeout was called and we were going to 15, we would put in a slash, and she's the second server. Well, yeah, she's the second server here. Well, it was 11-5-1. Sorry, no, 11-5-1. Jim's serving. So it's 11-5-1. We would put the slash down this way, and we would write an 11 here and a 5 underneath.
Yes. Okay. I think it's confusing, that slide.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's confusing too, because it looks as if that the timeout has been recorded on the right-hand side of this timesheet.
Yeah.
Of the score sheet, whereas in fact, you've recorded it on the left side of the score sheet.
Yeah. I think I understand it now, Alan. I think I'm good. You obviously, like you said, you don't invert the score sheet. You just record it, whether it's team 1 or team 2, serving or receiving in the appropriate box.
That's right.
I got you. Thank you very much.
All right.
So
Good.
can I ask a question?
I don't know. Who are you?
I'm Terry.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, Alan, and thanks for putting this on today, by the way. So with this one, so if the receiving team was one that called the timeout, where you put the timeout, do you put it on the right-hand side or the left-hand side?
Well, you know, with now taking the numbers out, you have to ask that question, right? Because before they had,
without going to the other one, because I'm guessing you would put it on the right-hand side, because that's technically, if you flip it over, that's the first time out.
the one closest to the score is being called or the number 1 box. So if you look here with it right side up in the serving area, right? This would be where all the number 1s would have been, and this is where the 2 is, right? So we would put it here for the first time out and here for the second time out. And the same down here, the ones closest to the scores are first and second.
So why did they take the numbers 1 and 2 timeouts?
Because when you write your numbers down, it's hard to write it over top of another number that was there. It wasn't very eligible or legible.
Okay.
I like the idea of taking it out. It's much easier to put your diagonal in and put your numbers in, and you can see what you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
It's a matter of getting used to. Okay, anything else? Isabel, what slide was I on, Isabel?
Try about 60. I think Isabel's asleep.
That was a test.
Al, I have a question. My name is Donna Aylward. I'm from Newfoundland.
Okay.
It's not related to what we were talking about, but throughout the presentation, there's a lot of reference back to times like, 2-minute timeout and 15 seconds and the warning, counting down 15 seconds left, timeouts for, the minutes for the timeouts, the minutes for the side outs. Is there a cheat sheet? Like I know that it's all documented in the presentation in the decks, but is there a cheat sheet that sort of says like 15 seconds for this, 10 for that, 1 minute, 2 minute, because there's a lot of reference to time throughout different, segments of the matches and whatnot?
I hear you. There is not, but there's something for you to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen one. It's interesting you say that because with the number of changes, we've just made a couple of cheat sheets on all the technical and disciplinary. I made a disciplinary chart, and Mark Pfeiffer, who's the head referee for USAPA, sent out a email, and he included a bit of a chart that showed the points and time changes. That probably came from Don Stanley, I'm guessing, since Don has a lot to do with the rule changes. And so that was a start. And I've incorporated that in the talk, and we'll get to it tomorrow. So those 2 charts are there. But the other is not quite as daunting as you think. There's 1 minute timeouts when you call a timeout. There's 2 minutes between matches, and there's 2 minutes for what do you call it? Equipment timeout. And yeah, I guess there's the 15-minute timeout for medical
And then
timeout.
there's a medical timeout.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, and I mean, I guess it's all as if you get used to it. It's like anything, you know, like keeping the
Yeah.
score, you know.
But
it's like-
you're right. It's just a matter of writing down a simple little chart and saying what the situation is and how long you give. But the calling the time back in is pretty consistent. You call 15-second warning at every situation to get the people's attention, get your line judge's attention, tell them how many timeouts they have remaining, and then at time zero, you simply call the score and expect everybody to be ready. If they're not, so sad.
Okay, well, that even helps. Thank you.
Okay. So that's going through again, really what it comes down to is score keeping, identifying the marks on your score sheet, how to use them, how to track them, how to read them back, and how important they are, establishing your people's names and identifications. I think I've stressed how important that is. You can't referee the match if you get the wrong people in the wrong position. You don't identify your starting server and know the difference between your first server. We've talked about code of conduct for referees on how we expect you to behave on that court. And you need to be transparent and impartial and fair to everybody out there, and always appear to be, and be fair. So those are the cornerstones. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about what we've identified as common and less common situations on the court. We've said at the start, this is really how to referee. It's not a rules review. However, talking about some of these, it certainly is getting into some of the rules in some detail when we talk about ERNIEs and ATPs and non-volley zone violations. Then we do talk, obviously, because of the amount of changes we've had the last couple of years. So we've done the same thing, incorporated that in the brief, making sure that the current year's rule changes are reviewed, the major ones. We're not going into the 120, obviously, because the vast majority of those are just name changes, wordsmithing, and keeping things constant throughout the rule book. So we'll go into the major ones and look at that in depth, the ones that are important to referees. They're actually all important. And that's why, again, I can't stress enough, you need to read the rules more than once, completely, stem to stern, front to back. And then we'll open the floor for any questions and that you might have.
So I'm going to make a comment here. There's some people that are wanting to leave. They thought it was 2 hours, and I know from experience, 2 hours sounds like a lot more when you're listening to Alan. But I also told them that there's 2 or 3 things we will review tomorrow. Some of the things that came up today that were not well explained or documented. I'll get a couple new graphics together for some of the items, and we'll pick it up. But by all means, if there's got some questions, go on. If you want to leave, this is just after the fact banter here that probably even get cut from the video. So, back to Al.
I'm just going to say, don't they know that COVID's going on? They got nothing better to do?
I had a couple questions there, man.
I can't hear you.
I couldn't get to my stall.
Whoever that is, they got to get closer to their mic.
He got further from the mic.
No, I can't find out who it is.
Don't know who you are. So what we're going to, maybe you want to type that into chat and ask your question, and we'll maybe be able to get it out. Anybody else got anything?
I have a question. This is Betty.
Hi, Betty.
Hi. About the questions that people are allowed to ask. I was practicing reffing yesterday, and when it was only after I called the score that people realized they were in the wrong position because they weren't keeping track of the score because I was a scorekeeper. But now I'm understanding that that's not the appropriate time for them to ask. So I'm a little confused on that one.
They can ask their positions up until the ball is hit to start the serve.
Okay, so right after I say the score, if they haven't hit the ball yet, they can stop and say, am I in the correct position?
That's great. Yeah, great question, Betty. So the routine here, that what you have to do, and if I hadn't made this clear earlier, at that point, that's when you go time. Throw your hands in the air, right?
Okay.
Right above your head. Ball is, that's right, exactly. Time. And I'll tell you, play stops. They look at you and you go, question has been asked. Are you the correct receiver? You are the correct receiver. And then, boom, then I'll recall the score.
Okay.
And you start the rally. So that's allowed. Previously, that would have been a fault if you had called the score and they had asked that. So that's where referees have really got to get this timing thing down.
Right.
And that's why I do have a timing chart tomorrow that shows prior to 2021 changes, what happened. And now with 2021, where the point in time for most issues are now the striking of that ball with the paddle to commence the serve.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think we can probably just go a little bit further. No, I won't. That's fine on that one. I think that covers it. Anything
Okay.
else?
And they can ask all three of those questions, right?
Any person on the court now can ask any question regarding their position, the score, whatever it might be. You still, if you get asked, what's my score? You turn around and quickly give them 4. Because if they're the receivers and they're stacking, for example, they're wanting to know who should be standing in the even box.
Right. They were stacking.
Right.
They were stacking. That's why they,
they're going to do that most often is what you're going to find as a referee. So you simply try to get away with the least amount of words that you can and say you have 4. If they say, well, what's the complete score? Then boom, hands up in the air, step into the court. So it does not appear as if you're calling the score and you announce its score is 4-3. And what I do to differentiate it from calling the score is I go, it's 4-3 second server. So I don't say 4-3-2, which could be construed as calling the score. I go 4-3 second server, first server.
Perfect.
So I haven't called the score anyway. So now I step in and then I say 4-3-2 and the ball gets
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. That clarifies it for me.
And one bit of housekeeping, if the provincial reps can keep track of who was attending from their provinces, because Al will have some things to send out.
Yeah, what I'll probably do, is send it to the provincial reps, and then they can forward it to their people, just like they did the links, and get that out there.
It's no problem.
Okay. Hey, anything else, or do you want to go drink in Newfoundland, or what's happening out there?
Geez, I want to go eating here, Al.
It's time to go make dinner in Nova Scotia.
I'm just going to say, it's not about you, Walter.
I realized that.
It's about the players.
Upper time in the Maritimes.
It's time for dinner.
All right, Bud here.
It sounds like we
hold
sounds
on,
like we've hit the point where we
talk.
can say goodbye.
Yeah, Alan, will you be covering changes in starting server receiver between games?
The starting server between games.
Yes, the answer is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. If there's nothing else, then
can I ask one quick question here is on a drop serve, I see it says the player can have their foot in bounds and then lift their foot before the ball hits the ground and then strike the ball.
Well, Dave, you're slightly ahead of us tomorrow. We're going to talk about that as the new provisional serve. And I did actually comment on the foot placement on the serve earlier, where that can be, it has to be behind. So, but we'll get to that tomorrow on the provisional.
Okay. Yep. No problem.
Don't want to steal any thunder.
Okay.
Hi, Al. This is Pierrette Hebner. I have a question about the score sheet in the third game. I noticed that the line is not across all the remaining scores and the timeouts.
That's correct.
Is that because of the new rule where they can change, go back to the courts after the score sheet has gone in?
No, not really. There's no need to put a line through the remaining scores because The only reason you're doing that for the first and second games is so that you don't inadvertently put a point up in the wrong line from where you're working on. That's the main reason you're doing that.
Okay, okay,
right?
that explains it.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
if you're in the third game and you hadn't scored this all out, you might well have put up this next point up into here to the second game. Well, this team, you're scoring on the third line, and this one you're on the second line, and it's confused with the first match or the second match that had transpired. So that's why you score it out. So there's no need at the end of the match to do it on the third game.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, somebody went to a lot of work here to establish these best practices, and they make a lot of common sense. And you probably don't know at this point how much sense they are and how important they are until you go out there and you experience some of the things by making the mistakes. And we've all done that. You know, just about everything you've seen that we're doing, I've made the mistake. I've done it. Right? Anything else? Everybody's shaking your head. Well, you're good to go. I'm good to go. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
And you're still smiling.
For sure.
Wave or something. Oops.
All right, well, I'm gonna
Yeah, tomorrow.
shut the door for everybody and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right.
Good night.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll email you a couple things, Alan.
Okay.
Couple
Sounds
things
good.
I'll get ready for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny where we have hard points each time, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's good. That's what it's all about. Identifying what's not crystal clear. All right. Talk to you tomorrow.